Today I'll be showing you guys how to make a simple health bar where you can take damage from something like fire and then heal yourself with healing pads. I'll try to keep it nice and quick. The first thing we need to do is go into our blueprints folder, into our BP third person character, and open that up and add a couple of variables to the bottom left. First one we want to add is dead ? The second one we want to add is health current, and then we want to select here and make it a float. The third variable we want to add is health max and leave that as a float. Following this, we need to add a custom event, and we will call it health change. Inside of this custom event, we want to add a input that is going to be a float, and we'll call it health change amount. Below this node, we want to get our current health, pull out of our current health, subtract the health change amount from our current health. And then outside of this, we want to pull this and put it into a clamp float. And what a clamp float does is ensures that the variable will stay between two numbers of your choice. So then we'd want the bottom number to be 0 and the top number to be our maximum health variable that we will drag and put in. Above this, we want to make sure that the player is alive to even set the health. So what we'll do is we'll drag out isDead. We'll create a branch by holding B and left clicking, plugging the isDead into the branch. And then if the player is dead, we want to say print string, and we will call it something along the line of player is dead. And then if it is not dead, we want to take the value that this has created and set it as the current health. Following that, we need to press compile save, so then we can have access to our default values for our current and max health. I'm going to set the default value to 67 and then the maximum health to 100. The reason why we don't start the player with 100 health immediately is so we can troubleshoot through problems when we create health bars later. Now we need something to damage the player, so compile save, open up our content browser, go back to content, create a new folder, call it blueprints, open it up, and create a new blueprint class. I'm going to create it as a actor, and then call it BP_fire. And then I'm going to press enter and open it up. We now need to pick an object that will represent our fire. So something we can do is if we click this little filter button, and you could filter through all these options. Right now I have static mesh and level selected, and it creates this little filters area. If you click on the all folder and then press static mesh, it'll give you all of the meshes that are in your project. Some of these are built into the engine, for example, your movement arrows and things that you see in Unreal Engine. If you don't want to be using items like that, you would just press content instead of engine. So if you click engine, you get all of these options. However, let's try to stick inside the content area. I am going to select SM cylinder. I'm going to click it, change the material to red, and then I'm going to drop the scale for blue down to 0.1, so it's more of like a disc. We then need to add the collision sphere. It's important that you reselect default scene root, so the cap, I guess we'll use a capsule collision, is hooked to the root, not to the cylinder. Because we scaled it down to 0.1, this would be super short. And then I'm going to press W, bring it up, R to open it a little bit. And a good rule of thumb for anything that damages players in game is you want to have it a little bit smaller than where you think the damage would start. This way it can create anticipation at close calls, and the player is less likely to get upset if they just clip something barely and then take damage. Okay, with our capsule selected in the top left, if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we have all these different options here. It's worth reading through these at some point so you can see the capabilities of collision capsules and spheres and squares. But for now, the one we are going to use is on component begin overlap. If we press the little plus right off to the right, it will create this node and bring us over to the event graph of the BP fire. I'm going to grab our fire real quick, put it up here. We want to ensure that when the fire is interacting with something, that it is the player, so the fire does not damage like a rock or something random. So what we do is we pull out of other actor, and then we do a cast to BP third person character, or whatever character you're using. And then this cast will ensure that whatever is going inside the capsule is the third person character. And then as the third person character, we want to drag out of this. And a good rule of thumb is whenever you're creating anything that is going to consistently interact with another object, you always want to promote that object to a variable. And in the bottom left, it'll create a new variable. And I'm going to call this the player. And the reason you do that is later on when you need references to whatever it's interacting with, instead of having to do all of this casting, all you have to do is pull out from the bottom left, and then you have your variable that you're interacting with. We then want to create two new variables. One we will call damage amount, and we'll create it as a float. And then another we will call damage frequency. Coming out of our set player node, we need to do a delay, and in that delay we will plug in our damage frequency. I'm going to compile and save. Compile, please, and save. And I'll put the frequency as 0.1, so 10 times a second. And then the damage amount will do 1. So it's 10 damage per second. Gonna be a pretty hot fire. Next, we need to get our player and then call to that node that we created, health change. And then plug in our damage amount. Highlight everything, clean it up a little. And we will grab it out of here and bring it back into here. Clean it up a little bit. Next, we need to press compile and save. Go over to our BP third person character, and at the end of our change, or our health change node, where we are setting the health current, we need to pull out of here and then do a is less than or equal to, and then make sure that you change it to plug into the bottom of that, so it's less than or equal to 0. And then take our is dead and plug that boolean right into the is dead. And then following that, we are going to take our current health and then pull out of that and do a print string. Pull out of this white one and do a print string, and then plug that into the string. And then we can press compile and save. Next thing we need to do is go to our level third person, undo our filter, drop our fire in, and ensure that it begins to take the health away. And you'll notice that the health goes away. However, when you step off it, you continue to take damage even though you're not in the fire, all the way up until player is dead. Now, the reason why that's happening is we have it so the fire exists, and as soon as the player collides with it, it reaches out and begins this loop here. And it's going to continue to do the loop indefinitely because we've never told the fire that, hey, the player walked away, so he's going to continue to damage the player. So in order to establish that communication that the fire needs to stop damaging the player when they leave, we need to go to our viewport, select our capsule, scroll all the way down to the bottom where all of our options are again, and then beneath the one that we selected previously, we have on component end overlap. So that's when the player leaves this capsule. If we press plus, it'll create a new node for us. We will need to create a new variable, and we will call it able to damage player. And then we will, out of this on component end overlap, take out of our other actor and cast to BP underscore third person character. And when it is a successful cast, saying that that is the object that left, we are going to set this able to damage player to false. Now above this, in our loop that we created before, we need to add a branch. And that branch will go immediately in the middle of the loop, where we will press B, and then we'll drag our able to damage player directly into here. And we will drag this over here, and then directly before it goes into that loop, we need to set it so we're actually able to damage the player. Compile and save. Now, if we return to our third person level and we press play, if we step onto the fire, we'll begin taking damage. If we step off, we stop. If we step back on, we'll begin taking damage again and allow it to go all the way down to 0 into where the player is now dead. However, that's not very pleasing to look at as a player. Typically, you would want some kind of health bar or indicator of you actually taking the damage rather than just a string of numbers. So next, we'll have to work on a widget in order to display this information in a way that the player can easily understand. So to do that, what we will do is go into our content folder again, and then create a new folder called UI, user interface. Open up that folder, and then create a new widget. If you scroll down all the way to the bottom underneath user interface, and then we want to do a widget blueprint. Play option here, and then WB underscore HUD. So widget blueprint underscore heads up display. If we double tap enter, we can open that up. In here, there's a couple things that we want to do. First one is add a canvas panel by dragging in the top left and dropping on here. The next thing we want to add is a progress bar. And you'll see that our progress bar is up here, and you can drag it around, place it wherever you want. However, currently it's anchored to the top left. I am going to be anchoring mine into the bottom left. And I'll drag it down to here. I'll zoom in a little bit, and I'll make the size something like that. Next, I'm going to change the color to red. I am going to put the percent at 95%. I am going to right click on it and wrap it with a border, and select my border and make the padding 5 all around. And then I'm going to compile and save. Now that we've created the graphics for the widget, we need to actually add it to the screen. And the way that we do that is using the player controller. So if we go to our content, third person, blueprints, player controller, we need to locate the event begin play and follow it through. Eventually, at some point with most controllers, you're going to have a sequence that's attached to event become play. And before we add a pin to that, we need to go below and put create our custom event, and we'll call it load HUD. And then on our pin above, you're going to want to compile. On our pin above, press the plus, and then simply call out that node. And using this node, we are going to create a widget, which will be our WB underscore HUD. We are going to promote it to a variable immediately. HUD ref. And then we are going to immediately add it to the viewport. And we can compile and save. A quick tip, if you ever have to reboot your engine, and when this pops up in the bottom right, I personally always check the box and then say yes. This way it'll reopen up all the tabs that I was working on, so I remember what I was working on if I've left a project for more than a day or so. Now, if we return to our level and we press play, you can walk up on top of the fire and you realize we're taking damage, but the health bar is not really changing. And that's because we've never actually communicated with the health bar widget that, hey, this is a health bar. It's just simply visual. So, at the moment, we have established that the controller understands and knows what the HUD is. However, our health is stored in our BP third-person character, and our HP, the visual for the player, is stored in the HUD. There is no form of connection set up between the third-person character and the HUD yet, so there's no way that they can exchange information. And also, we do not have a reference built to the controller in the third-person character, so that's what we're going to have to do next. So, if we go back to our third-person character, we need to create a new custom event. And it's simply going to be called create reference to HUD. And we're going to add an input. And that input, we're going to do WB underscore HUD and make sure it's an object reference. And we'll call it HUD ref. And then pull out of that and promote to variable. If we return to our third person controller, we can then right click and then type get player pawn, pull out of our load HUD, and then cast to BP underscore third person character, place in our value, and then call out to the node that we just created, which is create reference to HUD, and then pass in a reference to the HUD. So our HUD reference, just drag it and drop it in. Compile and save. So now we have effectively had the controller communicate to the third person what HUD belonged to the player. So now the player knows that this HUD exists. However, they are not exchanging any information. That is what we need to do next. If we return to our WB underscore HUD, what we can do is in the top right, go to our event graph, remove all these, and create a custom event. And we will call it update health bar. And in this custom event, we want to have a single input, and we will call it a float, and we will say health percentage. And after we have that, we can compile, drag our progress bar out from the left, drag out of that and do set %. Drag in here, and then drag in there. And then compile and save. If we return to our third person character, and we ask ourselves, when do we want the health to update? It's whenever the player's health changes. So what we'll do is we'll take our HUD reference, and then we will say update health bar, take out the white line and plug it into the end of when the health changes, and we have to feed in the percentage now. We can get the percentage by taking the current health and dividing it by the max health. If you compile and save at this point, and you go check out your third-person gameplay, you'll notice that the health is quite high, and it'll bounce down immediately. That's because we created the original visual at 95%, and then the actual starting health that we put at 67. So you'll see it goes all the way down when we're standing on the fire. However, we want it to be accurate to how much health that we actually have when we begin playing, so we should set that. To do this, we just need to create an update at the player for when the health needs to be updated but not changed. So what we'll do is beneath this, we'll go and create another custom event, and we'll call it health update. And then we will use our reference to our HUD, pull our update health bar, and we can copy this bit from before and plug that in, and then compile and save. And then when the game launches, we need to go over to the controller and call out to the player. So we will copy this once again, and say health update, compile and save. Now when we begin playing, you'll notice that our health is lower and it does not jump down. And if we want to stop or have it be accurate, or I guess we'd want it to start at 100%, we'd go to health current. Instead of 67, we would make it 100, because that's what our max health is. Compile and save. When we start playing, notice it's now at 100%, and then we'll go down from there. We have now established a way for the player to communicate with the widget and update the health. So next, we need to add a way for the player to regain health, and it is probably just as simple as you'd think. We are going to go to our blueprints, take our fire, click on it, and if you press Ctrl D, you can duplicate it. We'll rename it BP Healing Pad. Open it up. Visually, I'm going to change it to be blue. I'll go over to the event graph, and then go to our damage amount and just make it -1. And then compile, save, close this, and then drag this in. We can now effectively damage ourselves and then heal ourselves. If you have any questions, comments, observations, or requests, leave them in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, please leave it a like, as it tells me I'm helping people.